In ancient times, there existed 4 great cults and several lesser cults. It is important for those of us who seek truth to revisit the roots of our culture, religion, and government, and this must begin with the study of these ancient cults. The study of these ancient cults is called Astral Theology. There are 3 great teachers that have taught me what I know about Astral Theology. First and foremost, Jordan Maxwell, who has been reconstructing the history of these cults for the last 60 years. His website is jordanmaxwellshow.com. Jordan uncovered the following important information as a result of his research. Religion and politics are but 2 hands serving the same brain. Religion, government, and business all have occult origins. The second teacher is Michael Tsarion, whose website is Unslaved.com. And the third is Mark Passio, whose work can be found at whatonearthishappening.com. Once I discovered the work of these 3 men, in addition to reading numerous books on the topic, a whole new world of study opened up to me. The world may be aware of astrology and astronomy, but most people have never heard of astral theology because this knowledge has been occulted and hidden from us. In fact, religion and politics have deep occult roots, and in order to understand why the world is in so much trouble and why we are so controlled, it is important to delve deeply into the roots. The roots of most of the world's major religions can be found in the study of astral theology. Astral theology is another term for the religion of the stars. It is very connected to the 4 high arts of divination that were originally connected, and these are tarot, astrology, Kabbalah, and numerology. These grew out of the civilization of Egypt. They passed on to us a spiritual tradition for the uplift and right living and moral health of the human being. The tarot is particularly significant. Plotinus was a major Hellenistic philosopher born and raised in Roman Egypt, and regarded by modern scholarship as the founder of Neoplatonism. He lived around the time of 204 to 270 AD, and had something very significant to say about the tarot. The way I first discovered the writings of Plotinus came about in a very odd way. One day I tried the technique of turning down the lights, lighting a candle, and gazing into a mirror until my vision blurred. When I did this for a short while, I started to see a different face in the mirror, that of an old man. I remember saying out loud, "Who is that?" And the answer I heard immediately in my mind was Plotinus. I had never heard that name before, so I quickly went to my computer and typed it in. To my shock, I found out that Plotinus was a real philosopher, and it was his face that I had seen in the mirror. I then bought several of his books and read them. Interestingly, his whole philosophy was about how we are souls who eventually return to the One with a capital O. As a matter of fact, that was the name of one of the books. At the same time, I happened to be reading the Law of One channeled books from the 1980s, and that encompasses pretty much the same philosophy that Plotinus was writing about in the 3rd century. Here is what Plotinus had to say about the tarot. The Egyptians, either by exact science or spontaneously, had arrived at a method by means of which they could write with distinct pictures of material objects instead of ordinary letters expressing sounds and phrases. These pictures were not ordinary images of the things they represented, but were endowed with certain symbolic qualities by means of which they revealed to the initiated contemplator a profound insight into the very essence of substances of things, and an intuitive understanding of their transcendental origins, an insight which was not the result of reasoning or mental reflection, but was acquired spontaneously by means of divine inspiration and illumination. As artistic representations of this phenomenal world, they revealed, in fact, the ideal world of the soul. What this means is that the ancients realized the power of communicating in symbols. When we communicate only in words, our left brain mind is engaged. This engages our monophrenic mind, which is the single, focused, intellectual mind. But the right brain hemisphere is polyphrenic. It is receptive to color, music, sound, and art. And this is the part of the brain that Western education systems do not seek to develop. Actually, words are a very recent form of communication. When we use only words to communicate, we are blocking the other forms of communication, resulting in an emphasis only upon using the frontal lobes of the brain. Thus began the tradition of moving us into a solely left brain type of thinking pattern. This is the type of thinking that is taught in today's schools and universities, to the detriment of right brain thinking, which involves creativity, intuition, and pattern recognition. This is why there is little focus placed in these institutions on developing right brain intelligence or in making students whole brain thinkers. Again, one of the most important themes to the ancients was the unification of opposites. The Shiva Shakti principle of Tantra is just one example. According to ancient Chinese teachings, the masculine and feminine principles are united in the yin-yang. The saying goes, within the white is contained the black, and within the black is contained the white. The ancient adepts knew they could utilize symbolic communication to ensure that the profane and uninitiated would be unable to interpret the symbols and thus access the occulted knowledge. The higher power of the universe communicates to us through symbols, rhythms, colors, shapes, vibrations, and numbers. And we can learn to tune into these, like the ancient adepts did, and access wisdom. The reason why divination arts such as the tarot have been denigrated by the elite class, our controllers, is because they well know the power of these ancient arts. The controllers themselves are well aware that the power of these arts can be used to subtly control the bodies, minds, and emotions of the masses, and they have used and are using this occult knowledge to maintain their control over us. These groups especially control us through religion, government, and media. The subversive use of sacred symbolism is all over the mainstream media. Why? Because our right brain hemispheres take in the messages subliminally, even though we are not aware of it. The controllers know how to manipulate us in this way, and they use propaganda and fear tactics to keep us in the dark. The Judeo-Christian tradition in later eras did not want to be connected to the ancient cults, so they set about prohibitions regarding the use of graven images. Exodus 20:4 says, "You shall not make for yourself a graven image." Of course, Egypt and the ancient world were covered in graven images of God and the mystery of being. There were many visual images of God that came out of ancient India as well. This is because man expressed his reality in visual images, so this, the controllers decided, had to go. Leonard Schlein, in his book The Alphabet and the Goddess, wrote, "Idol worship comes from the Latin idolum, which comes from the Greek eidolon, meaning image. So the sin of idol worship is the sin of making visual images." He expounds on this by saying, "The second commandment forbids Israelites from conveying any iconic information, no illustrations, no colorful drawings, no art." Why should a prohibition against making images be the second most important rule for the righteous living? Is art more dangerous than murder? Those who decided what scriptures would be included in the final copy of the Bible sought to exclude some important principles that were sacred to the ancient cults. The occultist and Kabbalist Aleister Crowley said in his book Liber 777 that, for some reason best known to themselves, the translators of the Bible have carefully crowded out of existence and smothered every reference to the fact that the deity is both masculine and feminine. They have translated a feminine plural by masculine singular in the case of the word Elohim. The word Elohim is translated as gods and goddesses. Think about what a difference it makes to read in the Bible gods and goddesses, in other words, male and female plural. This is completely anathema to the whole idea of one all-powerful, one and only God. Jerry Mander, in his book 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television, says that the Hebrews, emerging between 3000 and 2000 BC, won an important political victory by denouncing what they called the worship of graven images. By destroying the power of the scriptures of the Sumerians and those who preceded them, they effectively destroyed nature-based religion and the veracity of images. This made possible the substitution of an abstract, single, male, human, all-powerful God. Because it was a sin to create any sculpture of it, it maintained its abstract nature. The ancients also possessed much knowledge about the zodiac. The word zodiac comes from the Greek word zoon, meaning living beings. Ancient artists originally showed the zodiac in human form because they believed the zodiac is not an external phenomenon. It is an inner psychic phenomenon. The human is the living zodiac. It is not about studying how our bodies, physical bodies, are affected by stars and planets out in space. That story represents the corrupted form of the art that has been handed down to us, the exoteric version, while the true version, the esoteric version, known only to initiates, is occulted or hidden. About astrology, Carl Jung said, "Astrology, like the collective unconscious with which psychology is concerned, consists of symbolic configurations. The planets are the gods, symbols of the power of the unconscious." One of the leading occultists of the 19th century, Helena Blavatsky, leading occultist and founder of the Theosophical Society, said, "When the planets of the solar system are named or symbolized, it must not be supposed that the planetary bodies themselves are referred to, except as types on a purely physical plane in the septenary nature of the psychic and spiritual worlds." The early Christian fathers prohibited the study of astrology. However, to show the duplicitous nature of the church, 600 years after a church council formally banned astrology, the dates of the Pope's coronation were determined by the zodiac, and the church hierarchy used their own astrologers. Signs of the zodiac appeared all over church furnishings, such as doorways, baptismal fonts, and manuscripts. This is yet another example of what they know that you are not allowed to know. There are two more high arts of divination that are part of the Western magical tradition. These are Kabbalah and Numerology. The Kabbalistic system is thought by many to be the creation of the Hebrews, but in fact it is far more ancient than that. The reason we know that is that Kabbalah is an extremely elaborate symbolic treatise, and remember, the Jews were prohibited from making graven images. In addition, the Hebrew language is not even in existence until the captivity of the Jews in Babylon. According to Michael Tsarion, Kabbalah is purely Egyptian in origin. Kabbalah is a huge topic and must be the subject of separate videos. Also, the study of Kabbalah itself may be understood in very different terms. There's the Kabbalah of Jewish mysticism, spelled with a K, the Kabbalah of the Hermeticist or occultist, spelled with a Q, and the Kabbalah practiced by Christians, spelled with a C. Numerology is the science of numbers. Carl Jung said, "Numbers are not concepts consciously invented by men for purposes of calculation. They are spontaneous products of the unconscious, as are other archetypal symbols." This means that numbers have a much deeper esoteric meaning than most people are aware of. They are repositories of higher symbolic energy and are very abstract. The numbers represent elements that have many occult principles associated with them. As an example, an occultist understands there are three kinds of time: clock time, calendrical time, measured in seasons or 12 months in a year, and psychological time. Psychological time is measured in 12 hours, 12 months, and 12 signs, and the clock for measuring this kind of time for the ancients was the zodiac. Numerology is the art that ancients used to get in touch with the psychological clock and psychological rhythms. They accepted the principle that the zodiac was an inner zodiac. It was very empowering for an adept to learn how to read this inner clock, because know thyself is an integral part of the occult sciences. One of the most important archetypes of numerology is the concept of threeness. This was a universal occult principle. For example, the concept of past, present, and future. In Asian philosophy, the concept of three gunas, sattva, raja, tamas, which give rise in humans to the various personality dispositions. And the high Celts, or Celts, used the three spirals, triskelion, to symbolize the three main glands in the brain, the pineal, pituitary, and hypothalamus, which control all the other glands, hormones, and organs of the body. And then in geometry, we find the concept of three in the triangle. There were at least 4 great cults in the ancient world and several other important ones. The 4 great cults were the stellar, lunar, solar, and Saturnian cults. The other cults included the volcano cult, the cult of Dionysus, the cult of Venus, and the mushroom cult. According to Jordan Maxwell, these 7 cults form the origin of the modern theocratic state. He says, the leaders of the 7 cults decided that rather than fighting amongst themselves for supremacy over the ancient world, they should join forces. This conjunction of cults did not happen immediately or quickly. It took several centuries. The Old Testament tells the story of this coming together. The elite dynasties of these cults operate through their descendants in the world today and are extremely powerful. As an example, Maxwell talks about the word Israel, which is a combination of the names of 3 deities of the ancient cults. These are Isis, the moon goddess, Ra, the sun god, and El, the god of the Saturnian cult. To sum up, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said, the Christian church is an encyclopedia of prehistoric cults. And in the next video in the series, I will go into more depth about what each one of the cults was like and what kind of belief systems they had that are still with us in a lot of ways today. It's just that we're not aware of them.